Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining Painting with Picasso's Grapevine. My name is Leanna Hahn, and I will be your teacher and host for today. Today we're going to talk a little bit about placement and where do I start. So hopefully as you've been turning into these shows, you're gaining little tips, little suggestions, and our goal here is to take the scary out of starting. And one of the biggest questions that people ask me is, where do I start? You know, they walk into our studio and they sit down and they see a big scary white canvas and their eyes get big and they start to shimmer, but it really is not that intimidating. So what I'm going to do is kind of use this painting as a talking point and walk you through where to make those decisions, how to make those decisions, where do you start, where do you go next. That's really the key and takes part of the scary out of it. So we have in front of here a painting, it's called False Colors. And it's a very loose interpretation of a scene out in the woods here. We've got some beautiful birch trees and a lot of nice fall colors. The images down here on the ground are supposed to kind of represent the sun coming through the trees. You've got that beautiful, sky and reflecting down through the colors. So the first question is, how do I start this painting? So we kind of look at this and we decide, where is our foreground and where is our background? So if I'm kind of taking a look, I say, all right, this is kind of what I'll call my horizon point or my cut in the painting where this section is what we're going to call the foreground, what's closest to you. And this section here is going to kind of create the depth and make up the background. So I frequently use our hands. Our hands are the greatest measurement tools. I take a look at this and I go, okay, this is a little bit more the extent of my hand, but it's about halfway through. That's a good measurement. Then we also kind of take a look at the trees and how they progress out. One of the elements that helps us show that this tree is closer and this tree is farther, there's a couple things. One of the things is that obviously as we get closer, we're going to see a much larger tree. As we get further away, we're going to see a much smaller tree. This image is going to be much more brilliant and bright. The image, as it gets closer to the back, you'll notice they're a little bit more grayer, a little bit more fuzzier. And as we're kind of making the definition of a path, we're kind of creating a very slanted view. So to do this, I kind of say, all right, we're kind of placing the trees, they're slanting out. Placing the trees, we're slanting out. And then we're kind of creating a kind of a halo image around the back of the highlights, the back of the light, the sky shining through. So we're taking it up around here, but we're not taking all the trees. We're trying to create that depth of these are further away. So we're not taking these all the way up, but we're kind of taking the ones in front a little bit higher. And then ultimately, we're creating that halo by creating our lightest part right here in the middle, and then complementing this very loose, very a random color pattern. And this will be a lot of fun to do. So to get started on this, as I've mentioned, we start with our foreground. And what I've done is I prepared a canvas just to make this go a little bit quicker. Very easy to get this started. I basically just took the black and said, okay, we're going to start with our depth, our darker colors, and lay this down. Created a foreground area, decided where I'm going to cut that canvas, put down the black paint, and just went ahead and let it dry. You'll notice at the top of my paint here, my definition, it's not a tight line, very loose. We want that looseness because we're going to come over on top of it with different colors, bringing it down, creating that halo. A lot of what you do is, remember, you're going to paint over this. It doesn't have to be your final image. So when you start making little marks on your canvas, and that is part of the secret, you're going to paint over them, so don't worry about it. The colors that we're going to be working with today, we've got a nice array of fall colors. We, of course, start out with our black and white. We've got some Venetian red, we've got some ochre, we've got some cad yellow, burnt umber, cad orange. Let's see, we did a alizarin crimson, nice deep red, and then some cobalt blue. And then as far as our supplies, always keeping with a nice cup of water to wash out your paint brushes as you're moving from one color to the other, and then our dab rag. Don't forget, as we're washing these out, it's very important. You don't want to drip that water on the canvas. It'll remove all that beautiful paint and hard work that you started out with. So I started out again with a very large paintbrush, just stroking the black strokes on here and got that on the canvas. So we're ready to move on to the next step. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a very small brush and just have a very tiny, very square brush here. Get it moist. And I'm just going to put a few hints here. So if you recall, I said, the foreground was somewhere a little bit taller than the span of my hand. So we're going to say that's the back. That's kind of our cut. Then, as you recall, we said the lines came in diagonal. So we're just going to do just a little dotted line and say, okay. Remember, you're going to paint over that, so don't worry about putting that out there now. We're going to go ahead and start with placing some of our trees. Now, birch trees are very easy. They're probably the easiest trees to paint. They're very wobbly. They are straight. They don't have a lot of branches coming out the side. Normal trees have a lot of branches, a lot of twigs. Birch trees just kind of go straight up. So we're going to start that. And you notice my lines are very loose. I'm not worrying too much about where exactly they're starting, where they're ending. You don't want to make it an exact line, so you want to have some that start a little closer, maybe a little further, maybe a little closer to one tree versus the other. You don't want them evenly dispersed because, again, that looks too patterned. Nature needs to be loose. So that just kind of sets us for our eye. We say, okay, I see where they're going to go. Same thing on this side. We're just going to start it. And the reason I'm going ahead and starting this is because for the trees that are going to be closest to you in the foreground, we're going to have to put a couple coats on the white and have them more brilliant. But for the ones that are further in back, they're just going to be a little bit lighter. We're just going to go ahead and decide where we're placing those trees, just kind of laying them out. All right. So the next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to start layering in some of that brilliant color on the top. I'm using a very squared brush top because I like doing kind of a crisscross, almost like a basket weave pattern. And to create the depth, we need to get a couple layers out there. So again, always moistening up your brush, dabbing it off. And we're going to start with the ray, and we're going to jump around here. So you can't start with the wrong color here. You really can't go wrong. I'm going to start with the middle section and then kind of bring the oval, kind of that halo around it. So the middle section, if you recall, was our lightest section. That's where the sun's showing through. So I got a little bit of white, just putting it out there, jumping in, grabbing a little bit of that cad yellow, and keeping it very light. So people ask, how do I know I get the right form? And the answer is you can't get a wrong form. So you're going to get a feel for, once you start placing paint on the canvas, how much you like it. So if you want it to go lighter, put more white. This is the sunlight coming through. Now you will want to carry this probably as close up to the top because our halo is going to come around from the sides. So let's go ahead and place some yellow and white, just very loose. You notice I'm not blending it, I'm just laying it down. So get our first layer on, carrying that down slightly towards our horizon. Keeping it very light in the middle. Again, really loose, not blended. Don't put a lot of work into it. One of the key things truly is figuring out when to stop. So people they tend to get a little too, we call them overworked, so you lose the brilliance of the two different colors because they end up blending together and make one very merged color. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make that halo. We're going to go in with, again, we're going to start off with some of this beautiful Venetian red. It's kind of got a nice, almost a rusty kind of color. And I'm creating just random patterns here, very far apart, because I like the sporadic feel of the different colors. I don't want it to all be one color in one area. So I'm kind of creating this very broad, nondescript, nonspecific, random pattern. Then I'm going to go in with a little bit of this beautiful ochre. Love the ochre. And right on top of it, right while it's wet, I'm making kind of an, again, very nondescript, random pattern. So if some of my brush strokes are to the right, I'm going over top of them with a vertical brush stroke. Or if they're horizontal, I'm going vertical. If they're vertical, I'm going horizontal. Kind of making little X's. Nice. At this point, I'm going to add in a little bit of that nice cad yellow, or excuse me, cad orange. Doing that same technique, just adding in what those you normally get to see in the fall time is those gorgeous, gorgeous colors. Love the fall for all their colors. Again, you want to keep your pattern very inconsistent. I can't say that enough. Nature has inconsistent views. You'll never see a straight line. You will never see a very consistent pattern. At this point, I think, okay, got enough of the orange. We're going to go in with some nice alizarin crimson and just dab in some of the beautiful color. You could start bringing in a little closer around your horizon, or excuse me, around your sunlight showing through. Just kind of picking your pattern or your non-pattern, making it very inconsistent. You can start bringing it down a little bit as well. Now, look at the top here. So this is closest to where the sunlight is coming through. Let's go ahead and add some of that yellow. Because if the sunlight's coming through right in the middle, more than likely, it is coming through the tops of these trees as well. And as we get a little closer to the bottom of the forest, then we're going to add in some of that nice burnt umber, that nice deeper brown, because that's where the shadow is going to come through. You'll notice as well, I'm trying to cover in as much as possible, covering up some of that white canvas. And don't make it a solid circle. Kind of come in a little bit, come in and out. Trees are not, again, you're not going to see a solid shape. So let a few of them dip down lower and let it jog back and forth. This is a really, really loose painting, very easy to achieve. Now, I've been focusing on this area. I'm going to come back down to this little walkway here, and we're going to add a little bit of color. If you recall on the original, we just had a little bit of random color coming through. I'm going to go ahead and start with yellow. Very loose. They are getting larger as they're coming towards you. That's to show depth. And then we're going to jump back and forth. You notice I have not been cleaning out my brush as much because we have a lot of colors that are just blending in so nicely together. So don't worry too much about cleaning your brush. This is a very messy painting. Grabbing a little of that red and just kind of adding that as I feel. So what color should you use? What color shouldn't you use? Truly up to you. You really can't make it. These are all the reflections of the light coming in here. So don't worry about putting the wrong color or, oh, she put this color, I should put that. It's not, that's what I like about these very loose paintings, because it can become very, very individualized, really customize it to how you like it. Now I jumped in a little blue. Blue is one color that we will need to wash out before we move to the next color. So I'm going to start bringing in some of that depth. And with that, I'm going to grab the burnt umber, which is a nice dark brown. And we're going to bring in those dashes of color a little bit closer. A little bit closer to the bottom of the forest. Don't be afraid to put it up in the trees, just a little less. We want a little bit more down towards the bottom. And then actually you can add in a little bit of this black as well. Kind of giving it a nice pop. Kind of jumping. Where you see some of those spots showing through, go ahead, fill them up. I'm not going to get to all of these today, just kind of giving you an example or a suggestion. You yourself can spend more time kind of playing with the placement. Love the reds. Again, you notice I'm putting them in and I'm leaving them. I'm not blending them. That's important because otherwise you won't end up with a nice, brilliant color palette. You're going to end up with a muted orangey brown combination. So we worked a lot on our trees, on our tree line, and our sky. I'm going to add just a hair of the blue, just to kind of say, okay, we've got a little bit going on there. And I'm keeping it super light. And then kind of washing that off, going back in on top of it with the yellow and white as well. You don't want to end up with the green, but you just want to kind of create a, hey, this is the sky. Don't be intimidated if things get merged, if things get blended, if you grab some orange in the middle, just go over it. White is a wonderful color to cover up. So if you get some really dark colors, go over it with white, cover it up, let it dry, and then come back in on top with the color that you want to replace it with. It's kind of like your eraser, really. Now, we're going to go back down towards the bottom of our painting and kind of work on our trees. So, again, birch trees are super, super easy. Just as wiggly and as loose as these trees are is really what you're looking for. We're going to come in with that second coat on the trees that are closest to me. And we're going to bring them up a little higher. As they're getting taller, they're going to get thinner. It's okay to kind of go in and through the trees. If you feel like you want to jump and not create a consistent line, that's kind of cool too. Just shows that it's going through the trees. Again, taking my paint, making it a little bit more brilliant towards the base, looser towards the top. Starting to taper in those lines to create a much more thinner tree as we get towards the top. Now, these trees, I'm not going to work on these. I'm going to let them sit because, again, I like the fact that they're grayer. That shows distance. They're farther away. And the time that you're going to spend on these trees really is going to be more so focused on getting the little pieces of the bumps. And gosh, I don't even know the name of the bumps. It's kind of the little elements right up and down the tree, and we'll show you how to do them. They kind of distinguish them and call them, kind of makes them very unique to birch trees. If you get a little bit of color in there, just kind of go back over it. Kind of carrying this up again, a little higher. Kind of leaving the ones in the back. If you want to add a few back here, that's good. Now you notice that my paints are getting a little merged with the paint that's on there. It's the darker paint, it's brown. That's actually kind of nice. Again, it's showing distance. Now, if you recall, we've put our little dots there, just little reminders. Don't let those bother you. We'll just kind of go over them now with black and just fill them in. Black on black is great. You won't leave any spots on there. You'll end up with a nice finished painting. And again, I've been a little bit quick about this. I've got a lot of dimpling showing through. You'll want to take your time and really fill in that with different colors. But the one piece that I do want to tell you and show you before we are done is the technique where we kind of really show the birch trees for what they are. They always have those little bumps. And it's truly so simple as taking a square brush, dabbing it in the black paint, starting on one side, and just making a very, very light movement from left to right or right to left. You do those all throughout the tree. You can make some rounder. You're making some of them heavier. And that is really kind of what distinguishes those beautiful birch trees. So, the question is how many, and how many is too much and how many is not enough. And it truly, again, this all goes down to what you like. So take a step back. Don't forget, this is very important. Take a step back, look at your painting, and from that point, kind of work on it. And just start randomly adding them in here. And then you'll get it to the point that you enjoy it. So this paint still has a lot of work. Take your time, play with it, and let's kind of just review a little bit about what we've talked today. So we've talked about placement. So the biggest thing is take a look at your painting. Assess it before you start. Decide where you're going to start. Usually starting on your foreground is best, moving to your background is next, and then finishing up the center point is typically the best way to approach it. Of course, every painting is different. That's up to you. I hope you've enjoyed our session for today. If you would like any more information on our show and our painting services, reach out to us at info@picassosgrapevine.com. Thank you.